Well, hello again, everyone. This is Ted Schmidt, Action Coach Northwest, and we're here with another edition of our Business Spotlight podcast. And today, our guest is Harold Horgen, CEO of the York Group. So, welcome, Harold.
Hi, Ted. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast.
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to your insights. Okay, well, let's just jump right into the questions and get some really great insights, I'm sure. So, first question, if you had to start from square one in business, what would you do differently?
One thing I would do is I would focus more on the details of operating the company. I've always been good at selling, and in the early days, I thought that just bringing in the revenues that would solve all the operational issues. And what I found was that I was creating a lot of inefficiencies. So as I was out selling, and I come back to the office, and I start putting out fires that could have been anticipated if I paid more attention to the operational details. So I found out that I was not a really good detail person, a really good
Oh,
process person. I was there really as a
okay.
rainmaker and bringing stuff in, which worked out great. And I realized that I didn't do a good job of delegating. So that's kind of the second lesson. And that would be to delegate some of those roles a little bit earlier than I did. And that means bringing someone in. And start founders do this in a couple of different ways. One is that they have a buddy, they start the business together, they have complementary skills. One is the good on the outside, one's good on the inside. And a lot of
Mhm.
very successful businesses have been run that way. Microsoft was that way, Google was that way, Hewlett Packard, Apple in the early days. And so if you have that founder that you work well with, that's a really good combination. Otherwise, you have to hire somebody, and that's where the rub comes in because you may not have the cash flow to pay somebody that can do the ops for you. But now there's so many fractional options available that there's really no excuse for not bringing someone in. One of our clients was a Salesforce.com consulting company, and they did really well on the sales side, and he just didn't feel like he had the budget to bring in a CFO. And finally, I talked him into bringing in a fractional CFO 2 days a week,
Mhm.
and it just turned his business around. I was really able to focus on running the financial side of it. They brought a lot of big company experience to his operations. He was paying them on just for the 2 days, and he saved the company so much money and put him on such a much better financial footing that ultimately he transitioned into a full-time role. So there are different ways of doing it. But for me, it was the operation, the details, and delegation.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. What have your biggest learnings been as an employer since you began in business?
Yeah, so yeah, that's one of the learnings that you go through is that is hiring people and dealing with people, and
Yeah.
there are a number of things that I learned, and the biggest lesson for me, and I learned that fairly early, was never compromise on integrity, no matter how enticing it might seem to be. We were bringing on a country manager for the UK, and during the interview process, I knew this guy could bring us in a lot of money. He was just, I mean, one of those really alpha salespeople. But there was also something in my gut said that, I couldn't completely trust the guy. But I looked at his track record and bring in revenues. He had a lot of turnover in his positions. You see these people that rotate in and out of jobs, and you have to ask yourself, well, why is that? Why didn't he stay longer? And they always have a good story because they're good at selling themselves as well. So I brought him on, and I thought, well, I just need to watch him very carefully. And it turns out you just can't watch people carefully enough. And yep, he brought in a lot of money, but then he was cutting side deals with some of our customers, doing stuff that just didn't reflect well on us. And luckily, one of those customers called and said, this guy that they were dealing with, he's asking us for a kind of a commission on the stuff that he's doing, and we don't think that's right. So as soon as I found that out, I got rid of him. And I apply the same rule to suppliers and partners, anyone that I'm doing business with. If my gut tells me that there's a snake in the grass here, then I just cut the conversation short because people will find a way to screw you. It's just human nature. And so if you see those red flags, let's kind of just cut it
Yeah.
off, no matter how attractive the opportunity is, because the old story of the scorpion and the frog. Scorpions are going to do what scorpions do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's trust
And
your gut. I love it. Trust your gut. I
um,
hear that a lot. Yep.
Another thing I learned about as an employer with employees is that a lot of times having a good B student that really applies themselves and gets the job done is better than having that flash that A student that comes in maybe a little bit arrogant and thinks that they're a little bit too good for the job. So the challenge is, how do you keep those people? And especially as a small early stage company, because the question is, well, why don't you just hire the A student that also applies themselves? And the answer is, well, they're probably running their own business, or they're looking for new opportunities. Another one of our clients had done that. They were out looking for an enterprise salespeople, and they were a systems integrator. They had about 80 people, a really well-run family business, but not one of your real stars. And they went out and they hired this senior sales guy, came from a large company, and he was fantastic. He was just dynamite. And when they brought him in, I thought, this guy's not going to be here very long. No, he just needed a job, so he was desperate. So he took a job that was really beneath his level in order to have a paycheck. He brought in a big pipeline. Then after 90 days, he went and found another job. And that the pipeline that he built up evaporated because it's all built on his personal contacts, his relationships, and his sales skills.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. No,
And
you need those steady people that are there and just do a good
yeah,
job, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So are
Yeah.
you familiar with the concentric theory of management?
No, I'm not.
So the concentric theory of management is that the founder is going to be, let's say it's a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. They've got the drive, the intelligence, the skills, they're resourceful. They're not going to be able to hire another 10 because that 10 is either out running their own business or they're making a big impact on a larger organization. So you hire a 9 for the next level down. And human nature is people will hire people that are not going to be competing with them for the job. So the 9s hire 8s and so on. And it's very difficult for a company to maintain. There are few companies that do it and that I've worked with that have a phenomenal level throughout the organization. One of them is NTT Global. We're working with them with one of our clients, and phenomenal talented people throughout the organization. But in many organizations, you start degrading the quality, and the real challenge is when you end up with the 5s and 6s, and they don't
Mm,
realize that they're a 5 or a 6. They think they're a lot better than that. And they're the ones
okay.
that become the malcontents in the organizations because they don't feel like they are being valued. They're worth a lot more to the company. They're moaning and belly aching, and that starts to poison the rest of the working environment. Uh,
Mm,
so in the US, you can get rid of people like that. But I lived in France for 14 years, and once you hire somebody in Europe and they get through that initial 90-day probationary period, they're pretty much yours for life. You have to have a really, really good reason to lose an
wow.
employee. And so you see in a lot of companies, they get the sclerosis where there's a lot of unhappy people that don't want to be there, but the employer can't get rid of them, and they're not going to be. They don't have the initiative to go out and get a job someplace else.
Yikes. I was not aware of that. Holy smokes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really insightful. That I love that. That's fascinating. Okay. Okay, where am I at here? Okay, what are some common misconceptions about running a business and how do you address them?
The biggest misconception is, must be great running your own company. You're calling all your own shots. And you don't. As a business owner, you are beholden to everybody around you. Your other executives, your board, if you have one, your bank, your suppliers, your customers. When you're working for a company, you're typically answerable to one person, your boss. When you're
Yes.
running your own company, you've got to take all of them into consideration. So, yes, you are making the decisions, but you're making decisions based on the constraints of all of these other people around you. And the ones that don't, and you see these founders that are so much smarter than everybody else, and they're going to call the shots no matter what the outcome is, and they don't last. Very few of them last. You see some, and I'll use them in like Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs, very demanding, but outliers. They're the unicorns in terms of management, where they really know how to get things done, but they also have a lot of turnover in their organization because people can't stand working for them very long. So
Mm,
I think that's one big misconception.
wow.
And
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
another misconception is that when businesses run into cash flow problems, it's a revenue issue. And it's very rarely a revenue issue, it's an expense issue. One of the things I tell my clients is that a dollar of expenses will always be a dollar of expenses. A dollar of revenues is not always a dollar of revenues. And I'll give you an example of that. So I started my career in banking and commercial lending, and I went through a
Hmm.
2-year corporate credit training program, and then they sent me out to a regional loan office. And in that office, there were 6 other loan officers. So I didn't have a portfolio, it was brand new. So all of those loan officers peeled off part of their portfolio to give it to me. So I had a loan portfolio. Now, who do you think they peeled off? Did they peel off their best customers? It was me. I got all of the trash. I got all the workouts. I got all the ones that were in financial difficulty, were in bankruptcy, were in workouts. And that turned out to be a great learning experience. So I had a portfolio of, I mean, all kinds of companies. I had an oil distribution company, I had construction companies, plumbers, electricians, manufacturers. And so I had to get to do an analysis of, so why are these companies having problems? If I can understand why they're having problems, then I can help them either restructure their loans or provide some advice to help them out of it. And almost all of them complain about our revenues dropped, but our expenses didn't. And that was the crux of it. So that's when I realized that
Mm.
that as companies grow, they grow their fixed costs and their debts along with the revenues or faster than the revenues. So there's really no margin in the cash flow if sales drop. Now, some companies were impacted by catastrophic situations. One of the small customers ran a chain of ski stores, ski outfit stores, and we went 3 years without any snow.
Oh,
Uh,
geez. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
so, so no matter how well you manage your expenses, if you have zero revenues, you're not going to
Right.
survive. But for most of
Right.
them, they had gone out and they made an acquisition, or they took on a bigger space than they needed. They hired too many people. These were fixed expenses. And so that's what I mean when I say that a dollar expenses will always be a dollar expenses and dollar revenues won't. So if you get that dip in revenues because of the economy, or you lose a salesperson, or a big customer leaves, there's simply no margin. And I think that's again a big misconception that I had going into business was, well, if I'm in trouble, it's because I don't have enough revenues. And it was almost always because there was an expense issue.
Mm. Wow. Great insight. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Okay. This is good. Okay.
Okay.
What do you attribute your growth to?
One thing is I would say is one is by luck. Two factors. One is by luck and one is by design. The luck is that very early on in the 90s, I got into the technology sector. And so if you look at the long-term trend lines for the technology sector, it's always outpaced the overall economic growth, with one
Yeah.
exception. And I'll come back to that. So our business was helping technology companies expand internationally. I was living in France at the time. So we would work with primarily US software companies and help them set up distribution partners, resellers, offices in Europe. And I had a network of people. And that business in the 90s was fantastic because we had the tech bubble, the internet bubble. And so there were
Right.
thousands of startups with lots of money and no real revenue pressure because the whole business was about getting eyeballs, getting customers. So they were spending money indiscriminately on their expansion, which worked out really well for us. And so we were able to grow the business past Europe into the Middle East, into Latin America, and into Asia. And then in April of 2000, the tech bubble
Yeah.
burst
Yep.
and that entire market evaporated. All of our competitors disappeared overnight. I mean, you talk about a catastrophic, cataclysmic event. It was overnight. The whole tech sector just dried up. And we survived, and in part because of my paranoia about having overhead. So instead of hiring people as we expanded, we worked through a network of local partners and contractors that were all in on a revenue share model. So I worked from home at a time when working from home wasn't, the people went, where's your office? No, I'm working from home. So we had this network of subcontractors and partners in each country. We had a network of 25 people. And so our partner in Australia would bring in an Australian client that wanted to expand into Germany. Then our partner in Germany would help with the market expansion there. And they both got a cut of the revenues. the person in Australia for bringing the customer in, the person in Germany for doing the work, and then the house kept a portion of it. Kind of a franchise model, if you will. But what that meant was that in the 90s, we were paying people a lot more than if they had been employees, which is why our competition had set up offices and hired people. But when things went bust, we didn't have any real outgo. My only major expense was travel, which was easy enough to cut back because there wasn't that much
Yeah.
activity. But that allowed us to survive. So I'd say that luck in terms of the long-term trend being part of the technology industry, and then by design, by really focusing on not having any overhead at all, building up a business model that had as little overhead as possible.
Yeah. No, no sales, no expense. Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. How do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business?
So that you go through phases, don't you? And I think
Yeah.
that anybody who says that they can have a proper work-life balance when they're starting a business is trying to fool us or fooling themselves. I just don't think it's possible. So even a lone practitioner, a plumber, an electrician, an estimator, people that say, well, I don't want to work for a large company, I'm going to set up my own business, and they think, well, I can just work by 40 hours. Well, great. If you have enough business flow, you can work those 40 hours and you go out and work with your customers, but then you're spending the evenings filling out paperwork. You're doing your taxes, you're doing all the government forms, you're trying to do a little bit of sales and marketing. So there's no way it's a 40-hour job. Now, over time, yes, if you build up a stable business and you can bring in a management team, you can start making those trade-offs. Um, when we go out and when we're doing our marketing, we run into companies and we find out that there are some companies where the founders have the fire in the belly. They just really want to build something significant. And they're going to be working 80 hours a week. There's just no way to avoid that. And then we have the companies that are lifestyle companies. They've reached a certain level of sales there at 3, 4, 5 million, and they're making 15% margins. So they've got a really comfortable lifestyle. And they have decided that they're going to do the trade-off. Now they're going to spend the weekends up in the mountains. They're going to take the 4-week trip to Europe that they've always wanted to do. And that's okay for a while. But I've always been in the belief that you grow or you die. And especially in the technology sector, you can maintain a certain level of revenues for some period of time, but then something's going to change, some exterior event. The move from on-premise to SaaS, and now Gen AI is disrupting the industry, and you no longer find yourself competitive. So either you've built up enough cash in the bank that you're not vulnerable to the downturns, or you find yourself have to come back and spend that 80 hours a week rewriting your code and coming out with new products in order to remain competitive. So I think it's really tough. A couple of things that I've done. One is for the first 15 years, my wife worked with me. So one of the big sources of friction for founders that they're working 18 hours a day and they don't get to see their family or their wife very often. So I had my wife working with me in part because it saved money in the early days, and in part because she had a much better understanding of what the business was and why we needed to make these trade-offs. So she was in the trenches with me, and we did that for 15 years, and that worked out really well. And the other thing that I've done consistently is I've always put aside time to work out. Uh, I found that the time that I spend working out pays for itself. I'm more productive in the rest of the day. I sleep better, less stress. Because when you're starting a company and you're building up, there are going to be moments of real stress. And what I found is that working out for an hour is a way to relieve that. And so just for the mental health, for me, that's part of the work-life balance.
Wow. That's music to my ears. I'm one of those too. Every morning at the gym. That's where I am. That's
Yes,
where it goes.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So even when I
Wow.
travel, I will never book a hotel that doesn't have a decent gym because the first thing I do when I hit the
Yep.
ground is and then I just sleep better the first night and jet lag becomes less of an issue.
Yeah. Where's the workout center? Where's the fitness center? That's what I always ask. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Uh, I love it. Okay. What qualities do you look for in employees, and how do you foster positive and productive work environment. You've already kind of addressed that with integrity, but
Yeah,
anything
yeah,
else
and
to
that's
add on?
yeah. Again, that was number one, because other employees notice that as well. And if there's someone that this doesn't have the same level of integrity, they start to wonder, why is that person working here? And it starts to reflect on you as a boss as well, and the culture that you're trying to promote. I also look for people that don't take themselves really seriously. I think a sense of humor is really important. Uh, I don't want people who are, really arrogant or think so highly of themselves. Uh, in order for people to fit in together, I think people need to have an opportunity to be more informal and kid each other. And I'm not talking about political correctness or anything like that, but just where people don't get easily offended or really sensitive to where the position is, where the feeling of envy, jealousy of someone else that got something. So people that don't take themselves too seriously. Um, in terms of a productive environment, no micromanaging. I mean, the people get hired to do a job, and even if they don't do it exactly the way I would do it, I'm going to leave them to their own devices. That's why they get hired. If they hit their KPIs and they happen to do it in a way that I wouldn't do it, but they hit their numbers and they're good people to work with, then that's fine. Another thing that I look for, which is harder to find in the beginning, but you can find it during the interview process, is are they going to are they going to do more than just what they're required to do? So in every organization, there are people that just heads down. Ted, you
Are you
froze.
there, Harold?
Yeah,
We're
you
cutting
froze.
out here. I'm not sure if we got a
Yeah,
bit of a
your image is frozen. Are you going to be
problem
able?
with the
Are you going to edit this, or is this a straight through? Yeah, Ted, you froze.
Yeah, sorry, we lost you here. We could we'll edit that out. But anyway,
Okay.
so
Okay. So
I
so
lost you right. As long as they're hitting their KPIs,
right. Then I leave them
okay,
to their own devices. I'm not going to be prescriptive and tell them how to do their job. They're
right,
supposed to be the expert. The other thing I look for is, do they take the initiative to solve problems that aren't necessarily just part of their job? And you
okay,
see this in some organizations, people are collaborative and they help each other out, and there's no judgment asking someone for help. And we see this a lot in the restaurant industry. And I'll use that as an analogy. Some restaurants are run where you have your station, you have your 5 tables. And if a customer at another table asks you for something, no, that's not my table. That's not, you don't want a customer ever to feel like, well, that's not my table.
right,
And it's the same thing within a
right.
company. If someone comes to you and asks for help, say, no, that's not my responsibility, that's your job. That becomes very non-productive. So I look for people who are collaborative, that are willing to share their skills. In every organization, there have you ever seen there was a time they had this social mapping software of companies where they could see where all the connections were, and they would be able to identify the person that everyone went to, and could have been, Gladys in HR, but she'd been there for 20 years and she knew everything and everybody, and she was always there when somebody had a question, even if it wasn't a specific HR issue, and she was always that resource
Right.
that people could go to. So I like those types of people because it fosters a feeling of collaboration and shared objectives.
Excellent. Awesome. Okay, only two questions left. We're
Yeah.
sailing along here. What questions should I be asking you that I haven't?
Would I do it again?
Oh, that's good.
And I think in my case, I think the case for a lot of entrepreneurs, I really didn't have a choice. So I mentioned I started my career in banking, and after 5 years, I realized I really enjoyed banking. I hated working for a bank. And I came to the
Hmm.
realization that I just didn't enjoy working for other people in someone else's structure, the politics, the reporting, and that I just needed to be on my own. So effectively, I feel like I'm unemployable, and so doing it on my own is really the only option. And yes, so I would have done it again.
Awesome. I love that. Nobody has ever said that. That's great. I love that. That's good. Okay. Last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And any words of advice for other business owners who are looking to grow their business?
Okay, so in 5 years, I expect to be semi-retired and probably back in France. I will never be fully retired. I'll always do some consulting, but it'll be just to stay active and engaged more than the income side. Um, for people that are looking to start their business and build a business, my recommendation going in is always, what do you want to achieve with your business? Do you want to grow a lifestyle business? Do you want to grow a business that you can sell? Do you have visions of growing a big company that you can where you can have an IPO? And that's going to be the outliers. You can't really plan for that. So for most people, say, yeah, I want to get to the point where I can sell my business. Then if that's the objective, then you have to understand why somebody would buy you. Are they buying you for your cash flow? Are they buying you for your technology? Are they buying you for your revenues? Are they buying you for a presence that you have in markets where that they don't? And so, what is going to be the thing that attracts someone to buy you? And then really focus on building your product around meeting that objective. The other suggestion is slow and steady wins the race. And I think some companies try to grow too quickly, and that's when they stumble and they end up going broke. You don't have to be a unicorn to be successful. If you can just improve your operations every year, then at some point, 15, 20 years, it's going to be a success. And so let's say you're doing $500,000 today. If you grow that by 15% every year for 20 years, then you're going to have an $8 million business at the end of 20 years, at which point you can sell that to somebody and you will end up with a very comfortable retirement. I'm going to give you, and I'm going to end this with this a story, and this was from high school. There's a kid in my high school class, my senior class, C student at best, and no one thought he was ever going to be successful. And he left high school, didn't go to college. He said, "I'm going to see you guys in 20 years, and I will be a multimillionaire." Sure, okay. So we came back for the
Okay.
20-year reunion, and sure enough, he was a multimillionaire. And people want to say, well, how did you do it? Said, so me and my wife got together and we bought a motel for $3 million. And we worked for 20 years. The two of us, we didn't have kids, we didn't have family, but for 20 years, all we did was run that motel. 20 years later, it was worth $5 million. We paid off the debt. We sold it for $5 million, and now we're retired. And
Wow.
the Scottish have a saying that many a mickle make a muckle, and it's just kind of an incremental improvement in what you're doing. And he was right. He at the 20-year anniversary, he was one of the wealthiest people in the room, but he had a very clear vision and plan for what he wanted to do, and he achieved it.
Excellent. Awesome. Wow. All right. Well, thank you, Harold Horgen, CEO of the York Group. Wow, that was awesome. Great
Yep.
job. Thank you for
Great,
being our
sir.
guest today.
My pleasure.
All
Thank you
right.
very
Take
much.
care.
Okay, bye bye.